this video, we'll show how to thread the Happy's HCH 701 7-needle journey machine. What we're actually going to do is install a cone here on the needle 2 position here, which is needle 1, needle 2, and run it completely up through the thread tree and down through the head. We'll start by installing the cone onto the station, place it directly as shown here over the spindle, and we'll start by cutting a fresh end. First place to go is to the loop directly located above each cone. Each one has one. Run the thread from back to front, and then through any loops in the thread tree on the way up to the front of the thread tree. At the front of the thread tree, the thread must pass through these spring-loaded guides known as the upper rectifier. To thread the upper rectifier, hold the thread as you would a piece of dental floss and pass it from the operator's right as you're facing to the machine to the left. Pass it under the main spring-loaded plate and then continue from right to left, and then pass the side pieces and under them so that the thread is secured underneath the spring-loaded plate. Once we've run the thread through the upper rectifier, it's next time to pass the thread now through the upper tensioner, the thread brake sensor, and the lower tensioner. We'll first start by inserting the thread through this eyelet or guide, the upper right corner of the upper tensioner. And once through, the thread needs to pass between the upper tension disc, which is pressed down with a spring, and the lower tension disc, which is exactly the same kind of disc but flipped around. To make it easier to do so, you can lift up the tension disc and turn it. You'll see that about this point there's a notch that aligns with a peg that allows it to sit flat. But if you lift this up and turn this to the side, then the peg will now hold the upper tension disc above the lower tension disc, allowing you to slide the thread easily between the two. Also, make sure that the thread passes to the left of the stud that the tension knob is mounted on. Once the thread is between the two discs, you can now take the upper disc and rotate it so that the notch is aligned with the peg. And now that upper tensioner is applying some force onto the thread, which will make it easier to continue threading throughout the rest of the thread path. Next, onto the thread brake sensor. We're going to pass it around this post and then halfway around the thread brake sensor wheel. And then now pass this post to its right. Make sure that as you pull the thread that you can see the wheel turning. Next, we'll run it through the lower tensioner. To thread the lower tensioner, the thread must ride in the groove of the wheel at the base of the lower tensioner. So pull it around clockwise, hold the thread low so that it stays in the groove, and if need be you can turn the wheel by hand to help keep the thread in that groove. The thread needs to feed one full revolution around the wheel, and once all the way around, pass it into this hook at the lower left corner. Next step is through this hook and this pressure plate. And now it's down through the take-up lever. To run the thread through the take-up lever section, it's passing from right to left. Run the thread into the slot for the appropriate take-up lever. So this number 2 needle position, we want to run it to the right of the number 2 take-up lever. And following the blue arrow on the molded faceplate, pass it to the right of this guide and then come back up, going again from right to left. And then insert the thread into the pink eyelet of the take-up lever, going from right to left. Once through the take-up lever, pull the thread straight down into the same slot where it came up in. As you're exiting the bottom of the take-up lever slot, find the pink eyelet on the lower part of the faceplate and run it down through. And now we're ready to thread the needle. In threading the needle, if need be, cut a fresh end on the thread and insert the thread into the eye of the needle, going from front to back. Pull the thread through. Once you've threaded the needle, Pull slowly down on the thread and make sure that the tension system is exerting a constant and steady pull on it. And also, as you're pulling on the thread, double check the thread brake sensor wheel and the base wheel of the lower tensioner and make sure they turn smoothly as the thread feeds through it. Finally, pull the thread towards you and up and directly into the thread holding spring at the base of the head. Cut a short tail, leaving about a 1/4 inch or so coming out of the thread holding spring, and you're finished.